Hello, and welcome to the Thief in the Empty Room podcast, where Zen meets business in a unique exploration of mindfulness and mental health. Join me, your host, Craig French, as I sit down with artists, entrepreneurs, and Zen teachers to uncover the secrets of expanding creative problem solving, reducing stress, and finding balance in this fast paced world. Today's guest for season 2 and episode number 6 is licensed marriage and family therapist Jessica Meriglio and the founder of Mindful Trauma Therapy, specializing in EMDR, somatic experiences, and mindfulness. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. Nice
Thanks.
sunny day out. So,
That's always a good thing, right? Sun is shining is always a good thing. Thank you for joining me on this. You and I have a rich, deep history in Zen. So, what more appropriate way to kick off our episode together here today than sharing a koan, which is what I always do. Here it is, number 96 out of Shinji Shobogenzo. A monk asked his teacher, "What concrete thing did the ancestral masters get when they obtained the peaceful state?" The teacher responded, "It is like a thief who enters an empty room." What does that mean to you, if
hmm.
anything?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes up is entering in and allowing yourself to be surprised.
Wow. Hot take.
Yeah.
Hot take.
Hot take. Allowing for not knowing and curiosity. Yeah.
Interesting. I like that. That's the first time I've heard the word surprised,
Hmm.
used in this, but I can see what you're saying, and that's really quite interesting. And also the not knowing, right? That's a famous kind of Zen line,
Hmm.
and there's definitely some of that as well. So fantastic. Thank you for playing along with that little exercise. Appreciate it.
I never do koan practice. So I've always kind of run away from it. So it's fun to do that on a podcast.
Yeah,
Like, did I do it right? Ah,
I
yeah.
mean, it is interesting, right? I mean, I know that you know this, but for the listeners who aren't as aware, koan practice has a rich, deep history in Zen, and different lineages use it differently. And the one that you and I studied under and met through, Soto Zen, it's not as utilized as strict, but in like Renzai, for example,
Right.
people could potentially be playing, researching, contemplating the same koan for the entirety of their practice, over
Right.
years and years and years, which is so crazy to think about how they could keep coming back to the same question, the same teacher, and keep getting different answers, different responses. It's an interesting practice.
Yeah, I think it is and could be really valuable. I imagine for somebody like me and maybe like you, it would be hard to not constantly be fiddling with the puzzle. I think
the,
that would be really hard for me. So,
the
you know.
fidget
The
spinner.
fidget spinner, like my brain just would not, yeah, I don't know. But good on people that do it. I'm not bashing it.
I mean,
Just
Jess, I wonder if you've had a similar experience because you just like you made me just think of that moment on a retreat when your friend, aka John, le leans over into your ear or Ryland or whoever it was and says the theme of Gilligan's Island right into your ear right as you're about to start sitting for 8 hours of
exactly.
meditation. And it's like, thanks a lot, buddy. I appreciate you putting that little voice into my head. And that's kind of what you're doing with the koan, essentially, right?
Exactly. It's like a mind worm, right? It
Yeah.
just kind of keeps going. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think this is a nice entry. I mean, you and I have known each other for over a decade now. We both met through Dogen Sangha Los Angeles, which eventually turned
Mhm.
into Angel City Zen Center. And I know that your spiritual journey has taken a lot of different paths and you've been on different journeys through yoga and Vedanta. Please fill me in further, the audience, on sort of how you became a mindful trauma therapist. And yeah, I'd love to hear some more.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief because
Yeah.
it's a pretty wild ride. I never thought actually I would be doing this work. And for a period of my life, I was very opposed to doing this work. If I had to trace it back, I think it started when I was a child and I had this experience where I went to bed one night and I had the chicken pox and it was a little bit of a cold. It was a little sneezy, little itchy. Woke up the next morning and I knew immediately that everything had changed.
Wow. How old were
And
you?
I don't know the exact age because this was a trauma and my brain has kind of blocked out a lot of it, but I think I was probably around 8 or 9. And essentially, what had happened was the virus mutated. I've never told you this story, huh?
No.
The virus mutated was infecting a part of my brain. It was affecting
Wow.
the part of my brain that was controlling my fine motor skills. So my cognition was fine, but I had no way of speaking or standing or really moving in any intentional way. So this was terrifying, as you might imagine. I went to the hospital and there was treatment, of course, for it, but it really started inspiring me to ask certain questions about like the nature of life. What is this life? Who am I? And what does it mean that I could wake up one morning and have everything be different, have
Yeah.
everything kind of shift on its axis? I started asking these questions, having this lived experience of impermanence. Suddenly, the questions I was asking, there weren't really answers for in my world at that time. Obviously, I recovered. I went on with my life, but I just had these lingering existential questions. And then when I was in high school, just on a whim, I took a class on Eastern religions. The teacher of that class was really into Soto Zen. It was all about the practice. So that's when I started meditating. And suddenly I'm meditating and I'm reading these books. This is a perspective that doesn't really answer the questions that I have, but it like yes ands them. We're kind of like on the same wavelength. It's like, what is the nature of life? Yes. And what is impermanence? Yes. And what does it mean to be suffering? Yes. And is there a way out? Oh, this totally resonates with my lived experience and my curiosities about what it means to be human. And I can ask these questions without people looking at me like I'm totally nuts.
So did you feel like you found your tribe a little bit at that point?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was much.
At least a philosophical tribe, maybe not an actual physical tribe.
Yes, 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 yes. I would say a philosophical tribe. Suddenly I was like, oh, this is actually speaking my language. How cool that it's been around for thousands of years. I went to school for psychology. My undergrad was in psychology. And I had a similar moment where I was in a class called Sensation and Perception. And suddenly in this neuroscience class, I'm like, oh, wow, they're also yes-anding the questions that I have from this totally other perspective. Suddenly, here's this intersection between these two worlds that I, up until that point, had never connected psychology and neuroscience with Buddhism and religion and philosophy. And
Yeah.
suddenly they just work together. Like, what is the nature of sensation? What is reality? What is perception, right?
Hmm.
And it just kind of blew my mind. I'll just leave it at that. But that's kind of how I started asking these questions
Yeah.
and getting on this track. Yeah,
That's fascinating. You're from the East Coast, correct? Like
I,
myself,
I am.
and ended up on the West Coast. So we have that in common as well. I
Hmm.
think it's quite fascinating how much Buddhism has played a role in psychology, so much so that there's actually now methodology, Buddhist psychology. And
Hmm.
obviously mindfulness is all the rage right now in the therapeutic sort of space. And so for me, I've now come to this a little bit later than even you have, but I have found it similar to it. There's so much synergy in the two worlds. It's sort of like a match made in heaven, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, so much of Buddhist practice is the study of the mind,
Yeah.
right? So if you think about what psychology, actually, the etymology of that word is like the study of the soul, right?
Hmm.
And I know as Buddhists, that's a questionable term, but still this practice of introspection. So I think actually it makes a lot of sense that they work so well together.
Absolutely. Okay, so you had these two sort of profound experiences. You obviously had an undergraduate degree in psychology. Then I believe you got into the nonprofit space, right? And started exploring, yogic and Hindu traditions as well, right? To expand your horizons.
That was when I went into the nonprofit world, I was really interested actually in conflict resolution. So that was the period of my life where I was like, oh, I'm not going to be a therapist. Screw all that woo-woo stuff. I don't want to be touchy-feely. I want to work with people who want to murder each other. And that was like my thing, right? It's funny how life just sort of creeps in and kind of pushes you along a trajectory even when you
Yeah.
don't know it. So I was having these moments where I'm sitting with people that are like really experiencing a lot of suffering and really trapped in a lot of conflict narratives, or maybe they're refugees or what have you. I realize, oh wow, the best part of my day is talking to people one-on-one about what this all means for them and how they're navigating it. I worked in the environmental sector for a long time, and I was like, this is the farthest from psychology I could possibly get. And yet I was having these one-on-one conversations about people finding a peaceful place in nature and why it's so important for them to fight for resources. Eventually I just came to the conclusion. I was like, okay, you know what? This is the work that I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be working with people on this deeper level, one-on-one. When you can work with people on the level of the mind, I think there is a potential for shifting individual narratives, which will then shift how people show up in community and show up how they handle conflict. So it really ended up being just sort of a recognition that, okay, that's the level that I can meet people at, as opposed to the nonprofit world being this like top-down bureaucratic way of changing the world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which I'm sure was frustrating for you.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
as you were talking, I started thinking about, and I'm gonna probably butcher, I'll give the overview. It's now a nonprofit, ironically. A woman in a small tribe in Africa noticed that the community was just suffering unimaginable challenges, and particularly a lot of the women were suffering, from domestic violence and abuse with no training at all. She was like an auntie, an older woman in the community. She just started allowing the women to sit down on a bench in their little village just to talk.
Mhm.
And it started this whole entire movement that's now become like the red bench or the park bench. And now there's other more licensed people behind it trying to elevate it and provide funding and that. At the core of it, it was like a really simple concept, right? It's like sitting down and speaking to a fellow human and letting them talk and vent and share what's going on without any judgment. Creating a safe space, I think, is really all this is that we're really talking about, right? And what therapy is.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as you were saying that, I was thinking about with meditation practice and therapy, really, therapy is almost like it's like externalization of meditation, right? I am going to sit with you in a curious, non-judgmental place, and I'm going to witness everything that you are saying and everything that you are experiencing, and I'm going to meet it with compassion. Right. Eventually, at least in the way that I approach therapy, eventually you're going to start to be able to do that with yourself. Right. And really, isn't that what meditation practice is? It's just kind of meeting ourselves, pulling up a chair, sitting on the bench with ourselves, and seeing if we can allow whatever arises to arise without judgment, so that then we know what the next right action is to take.
Yeah, and to
Yeah.
reference John Graves again, a guest from season one, he said meditation is like becoming best friends with yourself, making
Yeah.
friends with yourself, which is what you made me think of also. Yeah, it's amazing how much compassion is needed in this work, but also in the greater humanity. It's sometimes extremely lacking, and when you discover it, it's like the most beautiful thing you could possibly find. Just that level of understanding of one another. It's
Yeah.
pretty incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing that I wanted to sort of, touch on was obviously you've now taken all this spirituality, all of your practice, and you've infused it into your personal practice, your psychotherapy practice, and you've actually created a bit of a methodology, right? Mindful trauma therapy. So,
Mhm.
can you speak to me a little bit about that and then how you've interwoven MDR and somatic experiences into that?
Yeah, EMDR, which in case people don't know what that stands for, it's got a very technical name. It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It is a frontline trauma treatment. I'm not really going to get into how it works or anything like that. It's quite complicated. Well, I guess I'll get into it a little bit. One of the reasons that it accomplishes what it does is that it draws upon what we in the trauma world call dual awareness. practicing this dual awareness, being able, and this will sound familiar to meditators, being able to have one foot here in the present moment and one foot in the past. Being able to witness what arises without needing to control or change it, but just kind of bear witness to it with a sense of openness and curiosity, to go back to the koan, maybe even a little bit of surprise, right? Just
Yeah.
allow whatever comes up, allow whatever arises to arise. And then what I always say in EMDR sessions is see what happens next. And so, can you bring this air of curiosity to witnessing a traumatic memory, right? I think that is where, for me anyway, I really draw upon meditation, mindfulness, but broader meditation skills with my clients as we enter into EMDR work. Because if you go into the work wanting to fix, wanting to change, if you're going into it judging yourself or judging the past, right? It's not gonna work. It's not going to resolve. It's not going to alleviate the suffering. Instead, if you can sit with whatever is here and then bring a little bit of curiosity, okay, let's just go with that. Let's just see what happens next. The mind will end up resolving itself. It'll end up resolving and discharging a lot of the suffering on its own. So it's really magical. When I was trained in EMDR, actually the guy who trained me in EMDR studied Zen for a long time. Can I give them a little plug? Is that
Please.
okay? It's through the name of the institute is called the Institute for Creative Mindfulness.
Mm.
That was the whole premise, was can we bring in meditation and mindfulness as a resource for people so that when they go in and they're witnessing these traumatic memories or these negative cognitions, they have a practice in place that will actually expand their distress tolerance and that they can go back to self-soothe. EMDR and meditation play really well together, and it's actually I teach all of my clients to meditate. That is the first step of the trauma treatment. Even if it's not a formal practice, just being able to practice that dual awareness and bringing curiosity and openness to whatever's arising is such a vital part of the work.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I was so excited to speak to you because obviously through this podcast and through my work, your work, we're trying to expand people's knowledge and understanding of Zen and mindfulness meditation. But I know that you'll get this when I say this. And for those listening who have never experienced a meditation retreat, it's highly encouraged. What you were explaining about the EMDR experience, approach, it just immediately reminded me of being on retreat in meditation practice in general, but using a retreat sort of scenario because you're sitting with yourself, with your thoughts for hours on end. And typically, from my experience, a half hour sit, a 10-minute sit, a 20-minute sit, you might just start scratching the surface. And so it's whatever is kind of at the forefront of your brain, of your consciousness, your subconscious. It's just right there, right? And you could get there in a 15, 20-minute, 30-minute sit. But once you start sitting for hour upon hour upon hour, day upon day, you start going deeper and deeper and deeper into the subconscious. And what ends up happening is stuff is bubbling up that you
Mhm,
haven't thought about maybe in 10, 15, 20, 30 years.
mhm,
And that's, in my opinion, when a lot of the real work in a retreat is done. And by sitting there and not having this overtly reactive experience, but learning to just sit and breathe through it, sit through the discomfort, you start to sort of transform that pain and it starts to shapeshift a little bit and maybe in some cases it releases and lets go and then you don't have to really face that trauma any longer. And that's why I'm
mhm.
such a proponent of it in my life and the people I work with. So does any of that resonate with you?
Yeah, and actually it reminded me, it was my first Vipassana retreat. So I did Goenka's Vipassana 10-day.
Please explain that briefly to the audience.
Yeah, so it's a 10-day silent retreat, which everybody's like, "Oh, the silent part, I couldn't do it." And it's I have to tell you, the silent part is not the hardest part. The hardest part is that you are sitting from 4 a.m. until like 10 p.m. And there's breaks, of course, but that's the hardest part is
Yeah.
meeting your meeting your mind. But the other part of it that I wasn't really prepared for was how physically painful
Yeah.
it is. In Vipassana, in insight practice, it's a little bit less strict, but in our practice of Soto Zen, really, you're not supposed to move around too much, right?
Totally.
The body's experience, whether external or sort of an internal felt sense, like an emotional experience, you're just supposed to be with that and observe it and and see what happens next, right? Let it arise. The amount of pain, physical pain, and to this day, I'm not sure how much of it was actually physical pain and how much of it was emotional, really caught me off guard. And I was like, oh, this is an amazing practice in non-reactivity. Can I sit here and actually increase my distress tolerance and just let the pain be there without turning it into something else?
Wow. Can I ask you at what
Mhm.
point in the 10 days that that kind of hit you?
Probably day 4.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean,
So,
so like the pain was immediate. Like let's be real. Like it was like after the first day. Also the beds are not very comfy. So
yeah.
like after the first day I woke up, I was like, I don't know, 24 or something at this point. My spine was hurting, everything was hurting, and at first I was just thinking, "Oh, it's the bed," or "Oh, it's because we have these puny little cushions to sit on." And then eventually I was like, "Oh, this is deeper. This pain, I think, is associated I'm meeting this pain with anger," was the realization. And I
Wow.
was like, I can't figure out if the pain is being met with anger or if anger is being met with pain. And so that ended up being for that first retreat, that was my big insight. I was like, oh, I respond to pain with anger and I respond to anger with pain. There's this connection that is really hard to separate out.
Oh my goodness. That is profound.
And what I will say about the second modality that you named that I practice is something called somatic experiencing. It is basically what I just described. Somatic experiencing is noticing the felt sense response to emotion and the physical response to emotion or thought or memory. And can we work with that? So, for example, you might experience anger and your body will get really hot. And if you're like me, you get pain in your neck, right? And so the response to that instinctually, the unconscious response to that for most people is to tense up,
Yeah.
right? And it actually makes it worse because what you're doing if we were to look at it from a Buddhist perspective, is you're clinging to it.
Hmm.
So in somatic experiencing, what we start to play around with is like, what happens if you soften just a little bit? What
Hmm.
happens if you allow, oh my gosh, what if you allow that anger to even expand? Will you explode or will something else happen? So you start to get really curious. I mean, somatic experiencing, there's all sorts of threat response stuff that goes into it as well. But the part of it that I find so fascinating is showing people that their experience of their emotions is not the totality of who they are and how they show up. So you can experience an emotion and you will be okay. Even if it's scary, even if it's painful, you can experience an emotion and it doesn't have to destroy you. That's revolutionary, I think, for a lot of people.
Absolutely. You said so many amazing things right there. So, on the somatic piece, what's amazing is that when you were talking about sitting with that pain and even allowing it to expand, I have found, and I wonder if you agree, it could sometimes happen in as quickly as 30 seconds with just some conscious breathing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Feeling where that pain, that tension, that tightness is, recognizing it, breathing into that space, trying to expand your lung, your body, obviously attempting to let it go and not grip it, like you said. It actually isn't as complicated as people may think it is.
Yeah. And actually I would just alter one thing that you said.
Sure.
And it's not so much that we let it go, it's that we let it be,
Mm. As,
right?
as the Beatles famously said.
Yes. Yeah. We let it be. We just let it be there. Can you just let it be there? Because when you just let it be there, it will change, right? And this is where it draws on that impermanence. Even emotions will change, even sensations will change if you don't cling to them. I'm not saying it's going to get better, right? It might get worse,
Yeah.
right? But it will not stay the same.
It's so interesting that you brought up that term, let it go, because the guest I had on before you today is a principal from New York State. And when we spoke a week or two ago in preparation for the podcast, we talked about letting it go. And he also said the
Hmm.
same thing. He's like, I'm struggling with this. Everyone keeps telling me, let it go, let it go, let it go. And
Hmm.
you just corrected me and said, let it be. So I think that's a reminder that I have to be a little bit more conscious with the words I'm choosing because that might be triggering for some people. Letting it go might feel different for people in their body than letting
Hmm.
it be.
Well, I think letting it go implies that there's an action that needs to be taken. Whereas letting it be means, can you meet it with some curiosity? Can you, to use Tara Brach's perspective here,
Hmm.
can you practice radical acceptance of what is? I'm not saying you have to like it, but can you just let it be here because it is what is here?
Mm, that's good stuff. And now the other thing that you said that I need to come back to, and I might have to have you repeat it, but the concept of you realizing during the Vipassana retreat that you were meeting your pain with anger, I think
Mhm.
is so profound. And Dad, if you end up listening to this, I apologize that I'm using you as an example, but my dad, we joke around and call him the Bionic Man because he's had 35, 40 operations on every part of his body. Thumbs, fingers, wrists, knees, back, shoulders, everything has been operated on. At 75, 76, he's basically living in a lot of chronic pain.
Mm.
And I think the natural default is
Yeah.
to be angry at why am I in constant pain? And when you said that, it was just pretty profound because I think he's not alone, you're not alone. I don't know if there's something that you and I could research or if there's some research that's already been done, but I think that there's something in the biology of the human experience that the natural reaction to pain, to physical pain,
Hmm.
is anger. And that means
Yep.
that it requires practice
Hmm.
to counteract it, which is essentially what you're doing with your somatic experiences.
Yeah, my hunch, and I'm not a biologist or anything, but my hunch here is that, when I worked in conflict resolution, we used to say that anger is the natural response to something that you hold dear being threatened. When I think about in somatic experiencing, when we work with threat response, right? When we feel threatened, we go into fight or flight, freeze and collapse as well. And I wonder how much of the anger that we feel from physical pain is that sort of natural fight response,
Yeah.
right? We're trying to protect ourselves, and so we go into fight. But it's hard when the threat comes from within,
Mm.
right? How are you going to fight it if it's coming from within? So that's where, yes, it takes practice. And it's not, anger is, my clients always laugh at me when I say this, but it's for real. Like, anger is one of my favorite emotions to work with. I love working with anger because it is magical. Anger is, if you use it right, anger is what we say in somatic experiencing. Anger is life force.
Wow.
Anger is the thing that will catalyze you to shift out of helplessness. So we don't want anger to go away. We just want to use that energy in a way that is constructive. And that's why I love working with anger. So when you experience pain, can you meet it? If that anger energy is going to be there, can you catalyze it into something constructive rather than destructive? And that is the work. That's the hard part.
And have you found that some of your clients are able to do it somewhat naturally, organically, with ease, and others it takes a lot more work? Is there a muscle that needs to be built up?
Yeah, I think most people struggle with this because anger is what I think we're socialized, especially in American society, maybe other places too, to treat anger like a bad thing. Anger is overly associated with violence or hatred. You hear it in spiritual circles too, like anger is toxic, anger is evil,
It's like
right? It's
dark
yeah,
energy
it's
kind of.
dark energy. And it's like, it doesn't have to be actually, because it's natural and it's valid. It's just how you're holding it. A lot of the work for people is to change their relationship to anger. A lot of people are afraid of anger. They're like, wow, if I let myself experience this energy, it'll consume me. I will explode. I'll get violent. And it's like, really though? But not necessarily, not if we do it consciously, not if we turn toward it and actually look at like, what is anger trying to do here? And can we actually do the thing that it wants to do without exploding, without it getting out of control?
To tie it back to your fight or flight analogy and your somatic work,
Hmm.
I think, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, part of the reason why anger is challenging for people is because of the somatic reaction that people have to it. So their shoulders get tense, the shoulders
Hmm.
come up, the chest gets tight, the blood pressure starts rising, the veins start
Hmm.
pulsating, lack of oxygen. So there's a whole somatic experience that happens with anger. And to tie this all back to you and I and our whole belief in meditation is that I try to talk to people that when you recognize that you've drifted off of the road, imagine that the road, the
Hmm.
straight road, is your equilibrium, right? Your equanimity, you're
Yes.
in complete balance. Your whole somatic nervous system is in alignment. When you start drifting off the road, that's less used anger, right? You're drifting further and further off the road. Your anger is taking hold of you.
Hmm.
Through practice, you could catch yourself earlier in the drifting and
That's
say,
right.
oh, I feel it. Let me come back to the road again to safety. For people who drift too far, that's obviously when trouble can arise.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And somatic work's really funny because people, I don't know who started this rumor. I have some ideas, but I'm not
Mhm.
going to name names. People have this idea that somatic work will work exponentially faster than talk therapy. One of the things that when people are inquiring about my work, they'll ask, like, so this is going to be faster than talk therapy, right? And
Oh, it's the shortcut.
actually, I need you to know that we're going to practice slowing down. Because if to use your analogy, right? Like if we're on this road, right, and suddenly anger arises and then you react to anger, it is a reaction. It feels instantaneous. It feels almost like you have no choice. So how do we insert choice, right? This is the meditation piece, right?
Oh.
We insert choice by slowing down. Can we create a pause between stimulus and reaction? So that then we have freedom to choose. Oh, here's anger. What am I going to do with that energy? As opposed to here's anger. I'm going to go break plates. A lot of it is this practice of slowing down, practicing breathing. How do we regulate our nervous system when the somatic response feels so immediate and so urgent?
We could kind of wrap up on this thought, but when you
Mm,
said stimulus and reaction, I thought stimulus and response.
mm,
And there is beliefs in some spiritual circles, even Buddhist traditions, Zen traditions, that in that space between stimulus and response, that is actually where enlightenment lives.
right.
Because
That's
if
liberation.
it's liberation, because if you actually train yourself to not react in between the stimulation and then how you're reacting and responding, if you train yourself in that space, that
Mhm.
momentary little gap of time, that's actually where liberation exists. And so, for anyone listening who thinks enlightenment is unattainable, I could never meditate, I could never find peace and liberation, just focus on that little piece. And I think that will take you a long way.
Absolutely.
Should we wrap up on that note?
Sure.
Jess, is there anything that you want to add about your work, how people could find you that may be struggling with mental health, trauma specifically? I know that you're in LA and you're a licensed California
Mhm.
marriage and family therapist, but anything that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me at mindfultraumatherapy.com. My whole thing is I offer a free consultation call, usually lasts about 20 minutes or so. If I'm not a good fit, I understand that it's really hard to find a good therapist that resonates, and it's also really important to find someone who resonates. So if for whatever reason I'm not a good fit, or I feel like maybe there's somebody that's a better fit, I will help you as much as I can to find someone that will meet your needs.
That's lovely. I think just as a closing thought, one of the things that I've found so beautiful about behavioral health, mental health industry after coming from years and years and years of corporate tech sales and entrepreneurship is that there's such a rich community of sharing resources because if I can help you, let me at least part of my job right on sort of the treatment plan, the continuing of care is let me at least try to give you some resources that will resonate with you. And I think that that's just such a beautiful part of the industry that you and I are in, is that
Hmm.
sort of that idea of paying it forward and giving the client at least something to go home with.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Jess, thanks so much. I value our friendship so much. Thank you for your guidance, your mentorship for me personally, as I've chosen to go back to school this later stage.
Yay.
You've been a huge support and advocate, and I'm forever grateful. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. If you made it this far, that means you've listened to the whole podcast. And for that, I want to say thank you. Please feel free to visit my website or social media for more information on my work at Craig Jarrett French. Until next time.